Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into Psalm 78.
Yeah, this is a big one. A long narrative psalm.
It really is, and it's framed, well, almost like a lesson passed down, using history to make some pretty deep points.
Exactly. It's all about remembering the past, specifically the relationship with God, and what happens when generations forget. It sets out its own purpose right at the start.
Which is fascinating in itself, isn't it? That directness. It makes you wonder, why does this ancient text feel so relevant now? These patterns of remembering, forgetting, loyalty.
The challenges of passing knowledge, the consequences, it's all in there. Let's dig in.
Okay, so it begins with this plea, right? Hear my teaching. Listen to my words. It calls them parables, hidden things.
Yeah, suggesting there's more here than just a history recap. There are layers to uncover.
And then the core mission statement. What we have heard and known, what our fathers told us.
Don't hide it. Tell the kids. Tell the next generation, even the ones yet to be born. It's an active command.
This knowledge, God's deeds, his power, the wonders it has to be transmitted, it's presented almost like a sacred duty.
And for clear reason, stated right there. So they put their trust in God, not forget his deeds, and keep his commands. Memory fuels trust. Trust fuels obedience. That's the idea.
But then, almost immediately, the warning. The whole point is so they won't be like their forefathers.
Right. Described as stubborn and rebellious. Ouch.
Yeah, heart's not loyal, spirit's not faithful. It sets up this huge tension right away. Learn this history so you don't repeat this.
And then it dives straight into the evidence. Example number 1, Ephraim.
Ah, yes, the men of Ephraim, armed with bows, it says, but they turned back on the day of battle. Had the equipment, but not the resolve.
Well, the psalm links it directly back to that core problem we just mentioned. Why did they turn back?
Because they don't keep the covenant, refuse the law.
And crucially, they forgot what he had done, the wonders he had shown them. Forgetting led to failure. It's a direct line.
So, what did they forget? The psalm reminds us. Those wonders back in Egypt, the zone region.
Unbelievable stuff. Splitting the Red Sea, the water standing up like a wall.
Leading them through on dry ground. And then the guidance in the wilderness cloud by day, fire by night, constant reminders.
I mean, just imagine seeing that. Constant, visible guidance.
And then the wonders in the desert. Water scarcity is life or death there.
And yet splitting rocks to give them water abundant as the seas. Streams from a rocky crag, flowing like rivers. Miraculous provision.
You'd think, okay, that has to stick. Seeing water gush from a rock.
You would think. But no. The very next line. But they continued to sin against him, rebelling against the Most High. It's almost whiplash.
How does that happen?
Well, the psalm gives an example. Right after the water miracle, they start testing God, demanding food.
Yeah, asking, can God spread a table in the desert? Basically challenging his power despite just seeing it.
Can he give us food? Supply meat.
Yeah.
It's this profound doubt, even in the face of evidence.
And God's reaction, according to the text, not pleased.
No. Very angry. Fire broke out. Wrath rose. And the reason is explicit. For they did not believe in God or trust in his deliverance. That's the root.
But here's the twist, and it's a really interesting one.
He's angry, yes, but he still provides. It's remarkable.
He commands the skies, rains down, manna grain of heaven, bread of angels, sends wind, brings quail.
So much quail, like dust, like sand on the seashore, right into their camp. Overwhelming provision. They ate until they couldn't eat anymore.
Okay, so now they must get it right. Even in anger, he provides.
You'd hope so. But the consequence is immediate and brutal. Before they turned from the food they craved, even while it was still in their mouths, God's anger rose against them. He put to death the sturdiest, cutting down the young men.
So the provision came, but the judgment for the testing and disbelief was simultaneous. It's harsh.
It really drives home the seriousness of that underlying lack of trust, doesn't it? Even blessing doesn't erase the consequence of the attitude.
And this leads right into the next section, highlighting that stubborn cycle. In spite of all this,
all the wonders, the provision, even the sharp judgment.
they kept on sinning. In spite of his wonders, they did not believe. It just seems relentless.
The result? He ended their days in futility and their years in terror. Lives wasted, essentially, because they wouldn't learn.
But there's a flicker, right, when things got really bad.
Yes. Whenever God slew them, they would seek him. They eagerly turned to him again. Pain prompted a response. They'd remember him as their rock, their redeemer.
But was it genuine? The psalm is pretty critical here.
Very. It says they'd flatter him with their mouths, lying to him with their tongues.
Wow.
Their hearts were not loyal. not faithful to his covenant. It's calling out insincerity, words without heart deep change.
That distinction is so key, isn't it? The difference between saying the right things in a crisis and actually having that loyal heart.
Absolutely. And yet, despite that, despite knowing the insincerity, God's
His
response.
mercy, again. Yet he was merciful. He forgave, did not destroy them. Time after time, he restrained his anger.
It's this constant back and forth, their rebellion, his restraint.
And the reason given for the mercy is, well, it's quite moving. He remembered that they were but flesh, a passing breeze.
Yeah, a recognition of their fragility, perhaps, their temporary nature.
But it didn't stop the cycle. How often they rebelled, grieved him, put God to the test, vexed the Holy One. It just kept happening.
And the psalm circles back to the root cause again. Why?
They did not remember his power the day he redeemed them from the oppressor, forgetting the foundation, forgetting Egypt.
Which sets up the next section perfectly. The psalm basically says, okay, you forgot. Let me remind you exactly what you forgot.
It goes back to list those plagues in Egypt, the signs and wonders in Zone.
And it doesn't hold back. Rivers turned to blood, couldn't drink. Swarms of flies, frogs, devastation.
Crops wiped out by grasshoppers, locusts, vines destroyed by hail, sycamore figs by sleet.
Livestock killed by hail and lightning. It's just one disaster after another poured out on Egypt.
Unleashing hot anger, wrath, indignation, hostility, a band of destroying angels, preparing a path for anger.
Leading up to the final terrible plague, striking down all the firstborn of Egypt, the first fruits of manhood.
These are the powerful acts of deliverance they kept forgetting, the very events that freed them.
And the contrast couldn't be clearer. While Egypt faced that,
God brought his people out like a flock, led them safely. Like sheep, they were unafraid.
while the sea swallowed their enemies, total reversal of fortunes.
And this journey culminated in success, didn't it? He brought them to the Holy Land, the hill country.
Drove out nations, gave them the land as an inheritance, settled them in their homes. They made it. The promise was fulfilled.
So finally, stability. Surely now the cycle breaks.
You'd think, after everything, settled in the land. But no.
But they put God to the test and rebelled. They did not keep his statutes. Even there, it's almost tragic.
The comparison is explicit again. Like their fathers, disloyal and faithless, as unreliable as a faulty bow, the pattern persisted.
And the rebellion took new forms, suited to the settled land.
Yeah, angering him with high places, those unauthorized worship sites, and provoking jealousy with idols. Direct violations of the covenant again.
And this leads to, well, another round of severe consequences.
God's reaction is described as intense anger again, leading to rejection. He rejected Israel completely,
The details are stark, abandoning the tabernacle at Shiloh, the central place of worship.
letting the ark, the symbol of his presence, be captured by the enemy, giving his people over to the sword.
Fire consuming young men, maidens without wedding songs, priests killed, widows unable even to weep. It paints a picture of utter desolation.
It really shows the depth of the consequence described for this persistent rebellion in the land itself.
But then another shift, just when it seems hopeless.
Yeah, this really striking image. Then the Lord awoke us from sleep as a man wakes from the stupor of wine, a sudden, powerful re-engagement.
And decisive action follows. He beat back his enemies, put them to everlasting shame.
And there's a sifting, a choosing. He rejected Joseph, Ephraim, the tribes that had been prominent but perhaps embodied that earlier failure.
But chose Judah, chose Mount Zion, which he loved, established his sanctuary there permanently.
Like the heights, like the earth, established forever, a sense of new permanence.
And central to this new beginning is a chosen leader.
David. He chose David his servant, taking him from the sheep pens.
And the psalm ends this historical sweep by describing David's leadership, which is presented as different.
Very different. He became the shepherd of the people, and it says he shepherded them with integrity of heart and skillful hands, inner loyalty matched with outer competence. A positive model, finally.
So after tracing this whole long, often difficult history in Psalm 78, what are we left with? What does it mean for, for you listening now?
Well, we've seen this journey. The command to remember, then the repeated forgetting, rebellion, consequences, mercy, insincere repentance, more rebellion, rejection, and finally this new path with David.
The themes just keep hitting you, don't they? The power of memory or the danger of forgetting. The nature of real trust versus just testing.
The link between loyalty and consequences. And this almost predictable cycle of human behavior. contrasted with divine mercy and eventually a renewed purpose.
It feels incredibly relevant because, let's be honest, these patterns aren't just ancient history, are they? How often do you struggle to learn from past mistakes? Personal ones, collective ones.
Right. Where do you see these dynamics of forgetting key lessons, testing limits, the gap between words and genuine commitment playing out today in your own life and the world?
The psalm ends with David, this figure of integrity and skill. A hopeful note, maybe.
It is, but it comes after, what, nearly 70 verses detailing failure? The weight of the psalm is on that difficult history. It implies the responsibility to break the cycle lies with the listeners, the next generation.
So the final thought, maybe, is about that responsibility. What does this incredibly detailed, sometimes brutal history lesson from Psalm 78 imply about your role in engaging with the past?
How do you ensure the lessons are truly internalized? So that description, hearts were not loyal, spirits not faithful, isn't your story. How can knowing this history, understanding these cycles, actually shape the choices you make about trust, about loyalty, about learning, starting today? That's something to really chew on.